back in mid-July, this email from Linus Torvalds was circulating around, and this can be basically summed up as, the Linux kernel is not an anti-AI project. At the same time, though, it is not a project where all processes have been thrown out the window. You can just do whatever you want. It is a free-for-all. Who cares about review? Who cares if the code is good? It is still the Linux kernel. There are processes that must be followed, there are practices that must be done, and recently Greg Crowell-Hartman added to this stance. LLM policy for drivers/staging going forward. Given the recent onslaught of LLM-generated kernel patches, not just for the drivers/staging subsystem, we'll get to some of the others in just a moment, I'd like to clarify my position going forward with regards to taking patches made with these tools. Whilst there's not like a clear hierarchical structure, if anyone was going to be considered the second in charge of the kernel, it would be Greg Crowell-Hartman. When there was a time that Torvalds was basically forced to take a break from the kernel, Greg's the one that was in charge. First off, drivers/staging exists primarily as a place for new kernel developers to learn how to get involved in kernel development. It contains loads of low-hanging fruit with regards to code cleanup and API changes, perfect for new developers to learn the process in a safe and friendly way with no pressure, as no one should be relying on the code in these directories. We don't just take fix all the coding style issues in this file type of patches that are generated by tools, as that would defeat the whole purpose of drivers/staging in the first place. We could do that tomorrow if we actually cared about the code in here, but rather, we live with the issues just because this is where people can start out and learn and grow from. This is an intentionally rough part of the code base, a part of the code base where there's a lot of edges that could be smoothed out, and it's not really that big of a deal. No one should be using this code, but if you're someone who wants to get involved in kernel development, and you don't really want to get involved in like a serious driver, when you don't really know your way around things, you don't know if the kind of work you're going to do is going to fit into that project, you don't really know how you can add to something where it's like a really established driver, this is the place you first get involved. This means that anyone attempting to use an LLM to clean up or fix any code in driver/staging is explicitly defeating the whole purpose of it existing in the first place. It doesn't matter that Claude could fix all of this tomorrow. They know that. Any developer in the kernel could do this. But this is the idea of like a good first issue. This is a problem where, yes, it would be nice to be fixed, but it doesn't need to be fixed right now. It's much better to just leave those problems there as a way to just onboard new developers. Also, at least right now, the people keeping an eye on this, they can tell if it's generated by an LLM. A lot of LLMs write in a very particular kind of way. One obvious tell is documentation, just overly documenting everything in a way that no normal person would actually do. LLMs are very good at finding suspect security issues in kernel code these days, but even with the best of the current and next generation tools, at least 1/3 of the results they generate are flat out wrong or harmful. The problem is when you generate 1,000 different things, you still end up getting quite a few actual good useful things. So if you think your LLM found/fixed issues in driver/staging file is really valid, it's fine to submit it, but you must have first tested it on the actual hardware for the driver and described how you have done so in order for us to be willing to take the change. This testing process should hopefully weed out the 1/3 of wrong reports, but that isn't always the case, so you must be willing to defend your submission and prove that it really is correct in fixing a bug that a user can actually hit. In other words, driver/staging here is a gym that is here to learn and grow your skills with. An LLM is turning into a reasonable tool to do heavy lifting for some things, but that should only be done by those that have already properly trained their skills to learn what type of lifting can be done and in what way. It's not very useful to know that you can drive your LLM to fix this problem. Great. Come back when you can fix it. Over the past week or so, I have seen some discussion about how this goes against what Torvalds was saying, that Torvalds said the kernel isn't anti-AI, so why is there a part of the kernel which is very clearly anti-AI? And I don't really think that is like a valid concern. It's not that every part of the codebase has to accept AI code. There can be parts of the codebase which are intentionally kept clean, either because it's a good place to first get started, or just because of the fact that sometimes these tools just don't know how to do certain things yet. Now, the reason why I bring all of this up is notably this part right here. Onslaught of LLM-generated kernel patches. There is a specific part of the kernel which has been dealing with this to an extent that things are having to get culled, we will say. The network side of the kernel. I hear from many who frequently use these tools that somewhere around early to mid this year, they actually got really, really good. It went from, every so often it might find something if you know what you're doing, if you're like a already experienced engineer, to the point where now they actually are finding real problems in real projects at a rate where, especially for the kernel, especially with the amount of interaction the kernel is getting, they can't necessarily keep up with it. As an example, 347 Linux kernel CVEs published today, by the way. Now, the kernel does kind of mark everything as a CVE. If it can crash the project, it's a CVE, because if the kernel crashes, that brings down the whole system. So, in a sense, it's kind of a CVE, but the point still stands that there's a lot of problems being found. As another example from August 6th, looks like our attempt to keep the PR smaller have only prevented this one from getting even bigger. In the last 9 days, there were 405 postings explicitly tagged with PatchNet versus 687 with PatchNet Next. 37% of posted patches being fixes is pretty crazy. And that's likely undercounting because LLM researchers more often post fixes without knowing to tag the patches for specific trees. I don't have historic data. In any case, we keep adjusting the criteria. The next PR will be smaller. Oh, surely it will be. Good luck with that one. Because as you might expect, this was not a one-time thing. Here's one from back in July. Lots of fixes, double the count even for the new normal, largely due to my time off, followed by a networking conference which distracted most maintainers, less so the AI generators. You can just send them off to do their own thing. You don't have to be there. As long as there is compute, as long as there is money, the AI will happily work 24/7 trying to find problems. And this has resulted in one particular AI bot getting caught in the crossfire. Linux wireless maintainer takes firm stance against AI/LLM generated slop patches. I'm going to state for the record that I'm going to make judicious use of ability to ignore patches and apply it to pretty much all Syzbot AI generated patches unless a 3-second review says this is obviously right. In particular, I will not comment on the patches as usual and argue with an LLM that can bullshit out code faster than another computer can even deliver it to me by email. Whoever is currently pretending to be the human in the loop absolutely needs to think about the patches, and if that's happening, it's probably no longer an AI generated sent by Syzbot, but you're going to rewrite it and send it properly. Get lost, Syzbot. Basically, there were patches being sent up, but rather than just having, a normal discussion, instead it wanted this maintainer to go and have a conversation with the LLM and, try to sort it out with the LLM, which is what should be done by the person who's supposed to be in the loop. What's really annoying some people here is they are basically being treated as the one who is driving the LLM. No, if you're sending out your LLM, your agent, to go and, do things in a project, you better be the one to review that code, not the maintainers in the project, not anyone else. If you're having it submit things, that is your problem. Now, the person who at least claims to be the one driving it does say that they are reviewing the patches themselves, and it's not just an LLM, there actually is a person in the middle. And this person says, yes, I realize that, but the experience still seems to be one of me effectively consuming pure LLM output just via an intermediary. If I had the time to do that, then I'd be perfectly able to talk to an LLM directly, cutting out the intermediaries, and get the issues fixed that way much, much faster than writing everything in emails. If, on the other hand, the intermediaries actually do the necessary legwork, then I don't think this whole process is necessary. In this case, for example, why the hell did it decide that it made any sense to have multiple branches of the same switch statement? And there are even only two. Implement the same validation? At the very least, I'd expect the human engineer to take that step back. Basically, you have two switch cases where they resolve to the same thing. Why is that there? That's just duplicated for the sake of duplicating it. This is why I'm refusing these patches, because clearly nobody actually even bothers to look at the semantics of the code before or during the patching. But this is just one such case on the stack, and this is a part of the stack that is actually being developed and actually being maintained. When the LLMs start poking at really old network drivers, really old drivers that frankly no one has the hardware for and no one is testing, then you start seeing some problems. So this is for the Moxa driver. This is a very old driver and no known hardware is still around for it. And the company says they do not need it anymore, so let's remove it as the LLMs are starting to poke at it and find interesting things which will just waste everyone's time given it's not actually used, so let's drop it. If someone actually needs it, it can come back in the future in a more modern way, as the style here is very old. This is the important point. If someone really needs it. Because what's happening here is drivers that nobody is reporting bugs for because frankly nobody is using it are now getting a bunch of reports because they're really old drivers that nobody has touched in a long time. They do things in weird old kernel ways which should have been patched a long time ago because no one was using the hardware, nobody even bothered to patch it, no one was maintaining the code, so nobody bothered to patch it, and nobody even knew there were like any problems with it whatsoever. So suddenly, these are placed to the kernel which seem very, very interesting. If you ask the AI to find you problems in the kernel, it's probably not going to find too many of them in like modern, well-developed parts of the kernel. But in parts of the codebase that no one's touched in, I don't know, 15 years, now we have a very different situation. This is a multi-port serial driver from 1999. When this was last touched, who even knows? Additionally, we have this. Remove the IP wireless driver. The last mentions of this driver on local Linux and telco support forums date back to 2011. This does not prove that no users remain, but the likelihood is too low to justify continuing to carry the driver in the kernel. The maintainer agreed that the driver should be removed and noted that it is simple enough to build as an external module if a user resurfaces. This is the other thing. Just because it is not in the kernel doesn't mean it cannot be used. The code is still out there, and it can be loaded as an external module. So if you are the kind of person that needs this ancient code, that has this ancient hardware, and somehow you are running it on the kernel 7.2 or whatever we're on right now, there is still an option for you if you want to do that. It's just, I find that very unlikely. And considering nobody is really raising their concerns, showing, I actually have this hardware, hey, don't take this away, which is what did happen when there was a consideration of dropping the PlayStation 3 wireless driver a couple of years back. Someone's like, hey, yeah, I still use this. This is still a thing that people actually use. Don't do it. What did they do? They didn't remove it. And going back a couple of months, we have even more of these. These old drivers have not been much of a maintenance burden until recently. Now there are more newbies using AI and fuzzers finding issues, resulting in more work for maintainers. Fixing these old drivers make little sense if it is not clear they have users. These are all ISA and PCM CIA Ethernet devices, mostly from the last century, a couple from 2001 or 2002. It seems unlikely they are still used. However, remove them one patch at a time so they can be brought back if somebody still has the hardware, runs modern kernels, and wants to take up the role of driver maintainer. Again, if somebody wants to maintain it, if somebody has the hardware, if somebody wants to actually do that job, they are more than happy to do so. The problem, this is a driver that nobody's maintaining, that nobody is working on, that has a bunch of issues with it, and nobody seems to be using it. So it's just filling up the issue tracker for literally no reason. And here is another one. Old code like amateur radio and NFC have been a burden to core networking developers. Syzbot loves to find bugs in BKL era code, and noobs try to fix them. If we want to have a fighting chance of surviving the LLM apocalypse, this code needs to find a dedicated owner or get deleted. Someone needs to step up and maintain the code, or it's gone. We've talked about these deletions multiple times in the past, and every time someone wanted the code to stay. It is never very clear to me how many of those people actually use the code versus are just nostalgic to see it go. Amateur radio did have occasional users, or so I think, but most users switched to user-space implementations. Since it's all super slow stuff, nobody stepped up to maintain the kernel code. So it's not like there is no implementation for this side, it's just nobody is using the kernel side because nobody was maintaining it, and the code is terrible and slow. We were lucky enough to find someone who wants to help with the NFC, so we're giving that a chance. Let's try to put the rest of this code behind us. There are a couple of recurring problems here. A lot of this code people have swapped from because there's either a better implementation, or they're simply just not using the hardware any longer, and because no one is using the code, nobody wants to step up and actually maintain what is there. Because this isn't code that was left in a perfect state. If it was, we wouldn't be finding actual, real, legitimate problems with that code. This is code which hasn't been updated in a very long time, nobody's maintaining it, it is really buggy, and nobody wants to deal with it. So all it's doing is just creating more and more and more noise, because there are different parts of the kernel where AI actually has been seriously helping out. For example, with GPU drivers. So this was from back in May. Older AMD GPUs of the HD7000 series actually had some driver improvements. This is really cool. Now, there are people actually using this GPU. There's not many of them, most people have moved on to something else, but there are legitimately people out there who are interested in this GPU, who have this GPU, and are actually able to test it and will care about these improvements. But most of the drivers we've seen today are drivers that nobody uses, nobody actually cares about, and nobody is supporting. The only people that care about them basically care about them as like a nostalgia thing. If you can prove you have the hardware and you can show you're actually running it with a modern kernel, not, oh, I have a thing in my closet and it's running a kernel from 15 years ago, but you're actually running the modern kernel on it, they're happy to keep it around. Especially so if you're willing to actually help out, whether that be testing or writing code, at the very least testing, right? Just getting involved in some way and showing that there are people out there who want this to stick around. Because pretty much everything we're seeing here is just a matter of no one has the hardware and nobody wants to deal with it. Because, frankly, there are more exciting things to work on than network drivers from 30 plus years ago. This is not some big evil plan to make you upgrade your 30-year-old PC. This is a maintenance burden that nobody wants to help out with. There is this idea that, oh, Linux has always been great for older hardware, and yeah, it is. But then people throw out things like, oh, back in 2002, no one was talking about old drivers being thrown out. Yeah, because in 2002, there weren't old drivers, right? Like, the kernel was a decade old at that point. There were no old drivers. You weren't running 30-year-old hardware on the kernel on Linux back in 2002. That just wasn't a thing. There are projects out there which aim to keep old drivers around. Things like T2SDE, this is a Linux distro, or obviously of things like the NetBSDs of the world. However, much like the AUR for a very long time, which people were not paying attention to, when the eye of Sauron points itself towards those projects, they start getting spammed with LLM AI reports. We'll see how that goes for them. And again, if you actually have this hardware, if you're actually running a modern kernel with it, step up. Don't just, like, make noise complaining, oh, well, they're dropping the drivers, oh no, my drive. Like, actually go to the kernel, go to the mailing list, send an email saying, I have this, I am doing this, do not drop the driver. Until you're going to do that, I don't want to hear that some, like, 30-year-old driver is being dropped. Like, if no one is using it, I think it's okay to drop it. If one person, a single person out there needs the driver, keep it around. But if there's zero, like, I don't care. And if you do, if you want a driver to be around for 0 people, get involved in the kernel. Go work on the project. Go fix these issues that are being reported. Go maintain the code. Like, somebody has to. Because you can't just say, oh, the code's always been good. We don't know it's good because no one's using it. I am almost certain there's going to be some angry comments about this one. And I get it, right? Like, I get it. You have nostalgia for this old hardware, but as I said, one person, just one person has to show, and you don't even have to, like, show pictures, just claim to have the hardware. Someone, if you do and you actually care about it, but you don't, because all you care about is, oh, it might be nice if someday in the future, maybe, possibly, I'd like to use this. Also, you can build these drivers out of tree anyway. Like, you can just build them out of tree. You can revert the patch, build your own kernel, and be good anyway. Like, it's not like the code's just being deleted from existence. Anyway. Leave your angry comments down below. So, if you liked the video, go like the video. Let me know your thoughts down below, whether they're angry or they're not angry. And if you really like the video, go subscribe as well. Hype the video on the mobile. And if you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Daily Bearer Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and someone, anyone, just one person.